Good evening, everyone. My name is Rita Hicks, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Houston area, I'd like to welcome you to Conversations with the Candidates. We have an exciting conversation ahead of us tonight, but before we hop into that, there are a couple of really important things that you need to keep in mind. The first, and perhaps most important, is that early voting starts on Monday and runs through November 4th, but Monday is the first day that you can show up at your polls and cast your ballot. If you want information about where you can early vote, in Harris County you can go to harrisvotes.com, and for our neighboring counties you can visit votetexas.gov. If you want information about all of the candidates that are going to be on your particular ballot, please visit the League of Women Voters digitized voter guide at vote411.org. It's a great resource. You can search your ballot by zip code and choose among the candidates that are on the ballot, learning about them in their own words. You can even take it with you to the polls. So don't forget, early voting starts on Monday. And if you need more information about that in Harris County, harrisvotes.com, and for our neighboring counties, votetexas.gov. Now, this is the fourth installment of Conversations with the Candidates that we've had for this election cycle. If you missed the first three, no worries. You can visit the Houston Media Source YouTube channel and take a look at those conversations. The first one was with the Harris County Department of Education Board of Trustees candidates. We've also had a conversation with the candidates for county attorney as well as district attorney. Next week, we'll have a conversation with the candidates for tax assessor collector to round out our county conversations for this year. And if you would like to check out our conversation about demystifying the judicial races on the ballot, you can also find that on Houston Media Source's YouTube channel. Tonight, our conversation is with the candidates for Harris County Sheriff. Both candidates are participating with us tonight. And before I introduce the first of our candidates, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about the office that they are running for. The Harris County Sheriff oversees the largest county sheriff's office in Texas, third largest in the country. The sheriff oversees approximately 4,600 employees and 200 reservists, and serves a county that encompasses almost 1,800 square miles, including 41 municipalities, one of which is the city of Houston. The Harris County Sheriff oversees 10 bureaus. Those bureaus handle everything from Homeland Security to law enforcement and criminal investigations to justice support and training programs. And in addition to law enforcement activities, the Harris County Sheriff's Office has a number of different roles as well. They include ordinances and permitting, managing records requests, and this could be anything from crime statistics and background checks to responding to subpoenas, handling intergovernmental records transfers, the gamut. And then they also manage a number of public programs, including child vehicular safety programs, homelessness outreach, motorist assistance programs, graffiti abatement programs, victims assistance programs, safe school initiatives. The Harris County Sheriff's Office manages the National Night Out program and also manages a tool called Offender Watch. The first of the candidates joining us tonight is Sheriff Ron Hickman. Let me just tell you a little bit about him. Here, you see him on the screen. Mr. Hickman, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So just to give you a little bit of background on Mr. Hickman, Sheriff Ron Hickman is a 45-year veteran law enforcement leader. He began his career with HPD, Houston Police Department, and then joined the Harris County Precinct 4 Constable's Office. He rose through the ranks in that office and was actually elected constable in 2001. He's a graduate of the Law Enforcement Management Institute of Texas and the FBI National Academy, and he's the recipient of numerous awards and recognitions for law enforcement leadership. He was appointed sheriff in 2015 and has continued to add innovations to the sheriff's office, leveraging technology for efficiency and heightened awareness on mental and medical health issues for the incarcerated. And we're going to come back to that here in a little bit. But to start with, Mr. Hickman, can you please just talk to us briefly about your unique qualifications to serve in the county sheriff's role?
Sure, be my pleasure to do so. I spent the last 25 years preparing myself for a law enforcement leadership role. As you mentioned, I attended and graduated from the Law Enforcement Management Institute at Sam Houston State. I spent the next 5 years teaching on faculty there, teaching other law enforcement leaders across this state. I then went to and attended the FBI National Academy, where you find probably one of the most prestigious law enforcement leadership programs in the United States. So I intentionally prepared myself for a leadership role and responsibility in law enforcement. I've never left the business, so to speak, in 45 years to do other things, go into politics and do things outside the law enforcement realm.
Thank you for that. So, given your experience with the Harris County Sheriff's Office, do you believe that HCSO is sufficiently resourced? And if not, what additional resources would you like to see added?
I'd certainly like to see more resources added to our patrol and both detention and investigation areas. The Harris County population is growing at a phenomenal rate. We add about 250,000 people to our population every 5 years. And we have to have a business plan that allows the Sheriff's Office to grow to meet the demands of that growing population. Right now, the inmate population is grown to a point where that gains most of our attention right now. So we seem to be stagnated in the area of investigations and in patrol. While we're continuing to deal with those demand areas, we're not growing at the rate we should.
Thank you. So, you're talking about how large and diverse Harris County is, and it's one of the largest and most diverse counties in the country. It has equally diverse needs, and so any person elected a county sheriff has to prioritize those needs. And I'm curious, as county sheriff, what would your top 3 focus areas be serving the county, and why?
Well, certainly running a professional detention facility sits among the top priorities. The jail has gotten a lot of attention the last 10 years, much of it negative. And so we've set about trying to make sure that we approach the responsibilities of maintaining care for a large inmate population in a very professional way, trying to make sure that our people are held accountable for their responsibilities, but we provide them the appropriate training and tools to do it. We reopened the Harris County Sheriff's Academy to make sure that we were training our people appropriately for responsibilities that deal with inmate care. We don't rehabilitate, we don't punish, we simply care for them while they're going through their journey in the criminal justice process. So making sure that we do that professionally sits on top of it. Another of my priorities is making sure that innovation and technology brings us into the current age. We're still largely a paper-based organization. When I came in, I was very surprised to learn much of the department still runs on paper. Our personnel area is still run on paper file folders. The scheduling of our detention personnel throughout all 4 facilities is still done on a single spreadsheet for every single floor of the 4 buildings. So we need to find ways to bring those things up to speed. A number of those areas we've already addressed and have plans in place. The implementation's not complete. For instance, the software package to manage the jail platform is under development right now, but it won't be implemented for another year. So things like biometrics, knowing that one of our employees was where they were supposed to be at whatever time, is very important to us. We have to check every cell every 30 minutes and make sure that our people are held accountable for that. We've added cameras inside the facility where they've never been before. We increased our camera stock by 500 just in one building. So making sure that that facility has the technology that it needs to run efficiently and professionally is very important to us. And a third area of priority for me is making sure that our law enforcement partners in the region and us have the ability to communicate digitally with each other. Post 9/11, law enforcement agencies are still not connected as they should be. We all operate independent silos of data. Our crime records sit in our system, HPD sit in theirs. Coincidentally, I happen to have a meeting tomorrow morning with Chief Montalvo to demonstrate a new computer resource that we've developed that will allow our agencies to work together, sharing data about offenses and suspects. My plan is to provide a tool that will make all regional law enforcement more efficient across the platforms that we have.
Thank you. One other significant issue for Harris County and the state as a whole is mental health. How do you believe the county sheriff should be leveraging the mental health resources available in Harris County?
Well, that's a really great topic. I've testified 3 times this year alone in front of the Texas legislature about mental health. As you know, the Harris County Jail is the largest of the mental health facilities in this state. And by virtue of that volume, we have a lot of experience in dealing with correctional mental health care. And we were the recent recipient of a grant from the Baylor College of Medicine to put psychiatric residents in rotation through the jail. So it essentially turns us into a teaching hospital. We'll have 5 residents going through that process over the course of a year. We're now in dialogue with the UT Health Science Center to do the same thing. Correctional psychiatry isn't as popular a field of medicine as we'd like it to be. And certainly we know from our experience that a larger component of the community is afflicted with some degree of mental health than we should be experiencing. How much of that is brought on by substance abuse or other societal factors, we're not sure, but we do see the results. On any given day, between 25 and 28% of the people incarcerated are on psychotropic medications, which is representative of the problems that we may experience in the community. But I think it's more indicative that the programs that are operating at the state level are simply insufficient to address the problem. We know the resources at the state level haven't grown dramatically over the past 10 years. We've come up with a number of programs like SB 1185 to address diversion opportunities for mental health issues. But in the numbers we saw in the original justification for that bill, we've increased the population that deals with mental health by 200 in just those ensuing years. It was 2.5 years ago. So we don't see any really tangible or substantial change in the number of mental health afflicted people in the incarcerated population. So we continue to do more to try to raise awareness about that problem and make sure that our legislators and other people look seriously at ways to address it.
So I'm going to drill down on this a little bit, just because I'm listening to your priority answer and your mental health answer, and I'm hearing a lot of about shared resources. Mm-hmm. And so can you talk to us a little bit more about what your general vision for shared resources looks like across HCSO, HPD, and state law enforcement agencies?
Well, I believe we should have a very strong regional footprint for things like crime analysis for law enforcement. We already have a very strong coalition in local, state, and federal resources, work very closely together. We have 56 of our employees embedded in federal task forces, which allows us access to a lot of information, intelligence level information from the federal level on down. And those collaborative efforts are essential for us moving forward. You recall a couple of months ago, the FBI arrested an individual for terrorism acts here in the Houston area. One of our sheriff's employees was actually involved in that task force operation. So we are directly involved in those issues, but we seem to have obstacles, if you will, still at the local level in trying to make sure that law enforcement shares information better. When we catch a suspect and charge him maybe with a burglary in Harris County, we don't know about the other cases that person may have done in other jurisdictions unless he just happens to tell us. So if we're able to search out those databases with the information we have, we could be clearing a higher number of cases and disposing of them much more efficiently by sharing those resources.
Thank you. I'm going to switch gears on you a little bit. So recently in the news, Harris County residents have been hearing stories about issues with preservation of evidence collected by law enforcement in Harris County. What steps would you like to see taken to ensure that HCSO's process for evidence collection, handling, and storage avoids similar issues in the future?
Well, we have a somewhat unique evidence and property storage. Our property room operates under the standards for an organization called CALEA, the Commission for Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies. So our property room is audited twice annually already. We actually presented a proposal to the Commissioner's Court Budget Office several months ago, before any of this evidence issue ever popped up, about a consolidated evidence and property room for the entire county. Obviously, it's under study by the Budget Office, but it would require additional space, additional resources, and additional funding to accomplish it. But it makes good sense in the long run to bring all of the property being used by the DA's office coming from county agencies to be stored under the same system.
Great, thank you. So one of the major lightning rods this election season has been the issue of immigration. Nationally, it's not an issue that's necessarily within the purview of the county, but Harris County does have a significant undocumented population. And my question for you is, what's your position on how the county sheriff's office should address the needs of undocumented citizens living in Harris County?
Well, we get this question all the time because there's so much confusion and misinformation about the immigration issue. People need to understand that the role of the local law enforcement officer, including the sheriff's office, does not involve any authority whatsoever when it comes to immigration status. You know, when we come into contact or encounter individuals, they need to understand that we are there to provide a service. And we have two interests, very simple interests. If you're a victim of crime, then you need to be able to avail yourself of the resources and services provided by the Harris County Sheriff's Office to you as a victim, period. If you're an offender and you've committed a crime inside the state of Texas, then you will likewise feel the full weight of the authority of the Sheriff's Office or another agency based on your offense against Texas law. No person is ever residing in the Harris County Jail as a result of anything but a violation of Texas law. You're never held there for an immigration violation, and in fact, your immigration status does not matter to us in the least because we have no authority for it.
Thank you. So another thing that we have been hearing about in the news for the past couple of years at this point is the issue of community tension with law enforcement. Mm-hmm. And one tool in addressing that kind of community tension is the topic of transparency. So my question for you is, what's your vision for transparency between the county sheriff's office and the citizens of Harris County?
We try to be as upfront and transparent as possible. You'll recall a few weeks ago an assault on an inmate inside the Harris County Jail, and we went to a news conference immediately. And there are compromises you have to make. I can tell you what I know today and be as upfront and as informative. But if I wait 3 weeks, I know a whole lot more and I can tell you more about it. So by coming up front early, then we're transparent about what we know. That may change in a few days, and we may know more, several weeks later. But I believe we're better served by being informative as we can be up front. There's a big push because of the availability of social media. Cameras are everywhere, information flies everywhere instantaneously. So that does add tremendous pressure to trying to provide as much information as possible, as quickly as possible. The two don't naturally coincide all the time.
And then the other topic that is frequently discussed in terms of community relations is this idea of community policing, which is an extremely hard concept when you're talking about a county as big as Harris County. But can you talk about ways in which Harris County builds relationship with its community?
Sure. We invest a significant resource in meeting with and creating dialogue with the communities in Harris County. We have a community services division that goes out to a variety of events to make sure that the community is aware of the suite of resources that we have and the services that we provide. You mentioned some of them earlier, things as common as Offender Watch. Halloween's coming up here pretty quick. And we want to make sure that the community knows that there are places you can go to check the status of sex offenders in your area, so you don't go knocking on the wrong door with your kids. Those kind of things that we can do, rape, aggression, defense, a variety of services, a full suite of services available to people, and just the availability to have dialogue with the community. And we meet pretty frequently in a variety of formats with community leaders, faith-based leaders, to make sure that we try to do what we can to forestall problems in the community. I get asked all the time, why don't we have things like a Ferguson or a Baltimore here? We don't have exactly the same formula. We're not geographically constrained into a small area. We don't have a boiling pot, but we could be one incident away. So without active dialogue with the community, then we could suffer those same problems. So we try to make sure that we have a way to have dialogue as often as humanly possible with all kinds of the different cultures in our community. As you mentioned earlier, this is one of the most culturally rich areas in the southeastern United States.
Thank you. So I anticipated my next question a little bit because one of your priority areas, as you've already discussed, is technology. And I feel like you have provided a lot of information about, in particular, facilities technologies being implemented. But can you also talk a little bit about the appropriate role of field technologies in assisting law enforcement in doing their job in Harris County?
Well, certainly, I guess body cameras will be the first thing that comes to mind when you're talking about field technologies. Harris County has recently rolled out our purchase for body cameras, and I anticipate them being implemented within the next few months. You know, we've been approaching it very cautiously for an operation the size of Harris County with all the agencies involved. There are literally thousands of cameras. We have to beef up the backbone, the infrastructure, the broadband network, as well as the storage to deal with thousands of cameras. So while we're in the process of ordering them, we've already gone through an evaluation period. We've tested several different manufacturers, 100 cameras throughout the county in a variety of different areas, and feel like the selection that we've made will suit us moving forward. Cameras almost always are beneficial to the officer. The problem we'll face in the public is the anticipation or the expectation that the camera is a panacea. And you know, the general impression is the camera should see it all. But cameras can see things in low light the human eye can't see. When the camera's in the chest area of an officer, but he looks to the side, the camera didn't see what he did, and vice versa. So we have to be careful in moving forward. We still have issues about should we redact an image of an individual not directly involved, what software tools will be necessary, what personnel and resources. Plus, we anticipate responding to a significant number of public information requests. So those all have an impact on the average taxpayer.
Thank you. Now, you also mentioned earlier the overcrowding issues that we have in our facilities in Harris County. Can you talk a little bit about your vision for addressing overcrowding in prisons in Harris County?
Well, there are people throughout the criminal justice community working on ways to bring that population down. But one of the things that's interesting is it's not unique to us. It's a trend that's being seen in other parts of the state and the United States. For instance, the Bexar County Sheriff's Office in San Antonio's overtime has doubled in just the last year. So our inmate population is seen to be on the rise. One of the things that's unique about this year is that we went over our maximum cap 3 months earlier than normal. It's been a seasonal problem up to this point. Typically it goes up during the beginning of the summer, stays high through September. But it went up in April of this year, and it's still up even now into the middle of October. So it's an unusual trend, not following historic lines. So, you know, we're working trying to find ways to improve our bail bond system. Certainly we seem to have a bail bond system that's upside down. Trying to find ways to expedite the delivery of evidence so that timing for trials can be scheduled faster, working with the DA's office and the judges to make sure that the courts can operate efficiently. So there are a number of things going on across the board. How many of them will immediately impact the population tomorrow? That'll be tough. You know, there are a lot of ambiguous kinds of answers to those things, but there are no near-term solutions.
Great. One final question, Mr. Hickman, and then we'll do our wrap-ups. So as of this year, open carry is the law in Texas, and this is an issue that law enforcement probably deal with more often than most. So as sheriff, what would be your vision for balancing the right to open carry with related public safety and education issues?
Well, it made me nervous, as it did a lot of people. I wasn't crazy about the idea. First, giving up the opportunity for concealment doesn't always seem logical. I understand the philosophy behind it, but surprisingly, open carry has not been a majority issue for us. Likewise, we have not had a lot of complaints. There was early on an anticipation that there would be a number of calls for service for people openly carrying firearms, that there would be conflicts as a result of it. But I think most logical people, reasoning people, decided that open carry wasn't for them. While concealed carry continues to increase, open carry has really not been a substantial part of our problem.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Sheriff Hickman. What I'd like to do now is give you a couple of minutes to address our audience watching at home and tell them anything you'd like to about why they should vote for you.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on and visit with you, have a conversation about the Harris County Sheriff's Office. I'm very proud to serve as your Harris County Sheriff. As I mentioned earlier, I've spent much of my adult life preparing for a leadership responsibility. And as a person who has focused on leadership and who has seen what can be done with the Harris County Sheriff's Office, I'd like the opportunity to continue the progress we've made. I'm very fortunate to have been endorsed by most major law enforcement employee organizations for this area because they believe in leadership style that we have, and I really would appreciate the opportunity to continue going forward.
Thank you very much. So if you're watching at home, you have just heard from one of the candidates for Harris County Sheriff, Sheriff Ron Hickman. Stay tuned, and we'll be back in just a minute with the next candidate. Welcome back to our conversation with the candidates for Harris County Sheriff. Joining me now is Mr. Ed Gonzalez. There you see him in front of you. Let me tell you just a little bit about Mr. Gonzalez before we dive into our questions. Ed Gonzalez is a lifelong Houstonian who has served his city as an elected official, police officer, and community leader. Mr. Gonzalez served the Houston Police Department for 18 years, starting as a civilian employee and then as a police officer, rising to the rank of sergeant. He led murder investigations and served on an elite hostage negotiation team before serving 3 terms on Houston City Council, using his law enforcement experience to increase neighborhood protection and reform the local criminal justice system. While serving on the City Council, Gonzalez chaired the Public Safety and Homeland Security Committees and also became Mayor Pro Tem. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Rita. Pleasure to be with you.
So I mentioned in the break that we already provided an overview for our viewers at home of the Office of Harris County Sheriff. So my first question for you is, can you tell us about what you think are your unique qualifications to serve in the role?
Yes. Well, as you mentioned, I am a veteran Houston police officer. that worked criminal investigations. I was on the hostage negotiation team, and then I used that experience while serving as Mayor Pro Tem for our city and city council member. And as Mayor Pro Tem, I helped manage a city with a $5 billion budget and 20,000 employees. So I have experience with large-scale organizations comparable to the Sheriff's Office. I also use that experience to be able to bring meaningful criminal justice reforms as chair of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee, and that's really what we need right now. We need meaningful, substantial criminal justice reforms here locally, and we need that kind of leadership, and that's the experience that I bring to the table.
Thank you. So when we're talking about the Harris County Sheriff's Office, do you believe it's sufficiently resourced? And if not, what additional resources would you like to see added?
Yes, well, I believe there's sufficient resources at the time, if they weren't being mismanaged, to adequately serve the residents of Harris County. And I'm worried that currently, instead of keeping residents safe, my opponent continues to create scandal after scandal and really mismanaging the budget and pulling resources effectively from patrol. And so I do feel that there's sufficient resources, but yes, we could always use more resources. For example, we've yet to implement a body camera program. I think that's just awful that in this day and age, that investment hasn't been made here locally. And I think that's poor management there, poor leadership. And so I think that obviously will require some funding. And then also we need more manpower as well. We're a growing, region, growing county. And that does require more law enforcement deputies, more deputies out on the street. And so that would be one of the areas where I think we could use, obviously, more funding.
Thank you. So Harris County is large, one of the largest counties in the country, and incredibly diverse and has equally diverse needs. So as county sheriff, what you have to do obviously is prioritize. What would be your top 3 focus areas for serving Harris County residents?
Well, I think for me, public safety will always be number one, and being that we have the strength of being so diverse, it also brings unique challenges. And I think that I could build on the experience that I already have serving as Mayor Pro Tem previously, having worked closely with very diverse communities, understanding different cultures. I could lead from day one and be able to work as in close proximity with all of these different diverse groups. And so I think that would be very important. I think there's already a trust factor there. And I would really implement community-oriented policing in these diverse communities as well. And then I think that the Sheriff's Department needs to be reflective from top to bottom. I think it sends the wrong message. We're currently, for example, in the command staff under the Sheriff's Office, there's only 1 female, for example. And there's only 2 African Americans, 2 Hispanics, and that's the extent of the diversity. But only one woman there, to me, is not reflective of the type of city and county that we should be leading, and we need to have a greater diversity. So public safety would be number 1, and then we've got to make sure that we're working proactively in terms of crime prevention and intervention. I'm very concerned that the murder rate, for example, between 2014 and 2015 is up 30%. So that's very concerning. So that means we've got to be closely working with communities to make sure that we're establishing good rapport so that they feel comfortable in the sharing of information and leads that could lead us to solve crimes. So that's another step that I would do. And also to make sure that we're working proactively towards the future to deal with a lot of the current issues that are impacting criminal justice across the country so that we can make sure that we're always trying to avoid those types of situations from occurring here locally.
Thank you. So one significant issue for Harris County and the state of Texas as a whole is mental health. So how do you believe the county sheriff should be leveraging mental health resources in Harris County?
Yes, well, I think that first and foremost, we need to be the strongest advocate. While on city council, there was no stronger advocate for helping protect those with mental illness, and I have a number of initiatives that had that aim and were successful. For example, the creation of group homes ordinance that help protect our most vulnerable senior citizens and those that suffer from mental illness. I created and helped author the first ordinance in our city. I'm very proud of that. I helped codify to the city budget the Chronic Consumer Stabilization Initiative, which was initially a pilot program that had been started before. I made sure that it's now a part of ongoing operations for HPD, where we partner a mental health professional with a police officer to better address those with mental illness before they ever get into the criminal justice system, or we minimize the encounters with police. And I think specific to the sheriff's office, I think that we've got to find ways to address those issues with a community-based response. Addressing mental health inside the jail system is very costly and very ineffective. And I point out that law enforcement right now is being charged with addressing 3 unique things that frankly do not, in my opinion, have a law enforcement response, and that's mental illness, addiction, and poverty. And so I think that we need to find ways to better address that. I would seek cost savings instead of the 500% overtime cost overruns that we're seeing right now, $1 million every 2 weeks. I would like to see that money instead go into community patrols and perhaps grants that we could work with community-based organizations to help provide treatment to make sure that they're not reoffending. I would look at models across the country that are more effective and are working. Miami-Dade, for example, has a very proactive program that tries to divert those with mental illness from removing them from the jail setting and dealing with them at the more of a proactive response to addressing them rather than just incarcerating, and looking to address other issues such as prostitution diversion initiatives. Dallas PD Police Department has one. I would look at models like that where we're addressing the core issues instead of simply incarcerating them because we don't know what else to do with them. So I would be a staunch advocate. We need to be leading on these issues. We can't be bureaucrats that say, well, we're poorly funded, or it's not my job, or my hands are tied. We need to be leading on this and not be being bureaucrats.
Thank you. So Harris County residents have been hearing stories in the news lately about issues with preservation of evidence collected by law enforcement in Harris County. As sheriff, what steps would you take to ensure HCSO's process for evidence collection, handling, and storage avoids similar issues in the future?
Well, I think that first and foremost, one of the first things, if elected sheriff, would be to try to address the issue that you just laid out. I think that with the 8 constables in Harris County, that we should have a discussion. I would bring the district attorney, I would convene the district attorney, I would convene the county attorney as well, and have a discussion on what's the best model for us to operate. Perhaps it's having a central property room. That we could have a uniform set of policies and procedures and make sure that those that are collecting the evidence have that proper training. My understanding is that beyond the evidence issues that have occurred at Precinct 4, for example, one of them was that the individuals collecting the evidence didn't have policies and procedures, for example, on the collection of DNA evidence. That's very fundamental. We need to make sure that that's in place. So I would make sure that we have those uniform policies. I have experience in this area because I was a chair of the Public Safety Committee that helped form the Independent Crime Lab for the city of Houston that in many ways is now a model. We removed it from under the umbrella of HPD, and a more effective model now where we're really seeing tremendous progress in an area that used to be behind in many ways, and also help reduce the sexual assault backlog that we used to have at HPD as well. Was part of the council and working with Mayor and my colleagues to address that backlog as well. So these evidence issues are something that I have a lot of experience and I could help apply at the Sheriff's Office from day one.
Thank you. So one of the lightning rod topics this election season has been the issue of immigration, which is a federal issue. No county official sets immigration policy, but it is a reality that in Harris County we have a significant population of citizens who live here who are undocumented. So what is your position on how Harris County Sheriff's Office should address the needs of undocumented citizens in Harris County?
Yes, well, I think that First and foremost, I think that anyone that commits a crime in Houston, Harris County, Texas, or Harris County, Texas, should be arrested and should be punished to the fullest extent of the law. We want to make sure that, again, safety is number one. But we also have to be mindful, as you said, that we do have a large immigrant community. And I think that there's very controversial deportation programs that we should not necessarily be a part of. These are voluntary programs. The current administration just renewed the program in June, and I don't think that that was the right decision. I disagree with that. We should not be deputizing local deputies, if you will, that are funded by local taxpayer dollars to be doing the Department of Homeland Security's job. In my opinion, we should have comprehensive immigration reform. And in the meantime, though, this kind of controversial policy could encourage racial profiling. It separates families. It's costly. There is a cost associated with it. And then it leads to more mistrust between immigrant communities and the deputies that are there to protect them. And so I think it's very telling that very few agencies still operated in the state of Texas. I think only 2, and maybe 32 across the country. And lately, there's been another lawsuit in Bexar County that was filed on these detainers that were placed, and there was a recent court decision out of Illinois that deems that these detainers that are placed, remember, this is a civil process. Under the Harris County Sheriff's Office, we're dealing here with criminal law, and we arrested somebody criminally, perhaps on a minor offense. And I think that we should not be getting involved in that civil process. And these detainers were recently deemed to be unconstitutional by an Illinois court. And so we'll have to see the impacts of it. But that's why we shouldn't be involved with this voluntary program. There's still other programs that we could participate on. The Department of Homeland Security still has access to our databases, and we'll still cooperate with them accordingly. But there's other programs that are in place, and I think there's much better ways to work with the federal authorities than to have this kind of controversial deportation program.
Thank you. So you alluded to this a little bit earlier, Mr. Gonzalez, but a national issue right now is the tension that we see in communities between citizens and law enforcement. And we've seen it erupt in a number of different kinds of cities all over the country. One of the tools for addressing those tensions is transparency. So I'm wondering if you can talk to me about what your vision for transparency between the Harris County Sheriff's Office and citizens of Harris County is.
Well, my vision is one where it's built on trust, that there is accountability, and we have to make sure that we return to community-oriented policing. I think the community wants to get to know their deputies, not at a time when they need them, at a time of an emergency, but when they don't need them as well, to develop that trust. They need to know that we're running a competent, well-managed sheriff's organization, that frankly, with the resources that we do have, we're the largest in the state, we're the 3rd largest in the country. We should be leading, we should be a model on criminal justice reforms, and we're not. We're not good at anything. In fact, we've become a laughingstock or criticized heavily for a number of scandals that have occurred. For example, the rape victim, Jenny, and many other issues. That should not be the case. We should be leading on these issues. And one of the most important ones, as you said, is that relationship that right now seems really fractured between law enforcement and community. We have to make sure that, number one, that we support our law enforcement officers, those that put their life on the line every day to protect us. It's imperative. If not, our system of justice breaks down. But at the same time, we've got to be cognizant that there is a severe tension going on right now where many communities, particularly communities of color, feel that they've been disenfranchised. And the statistics bear that out many times when you look at the mass incarceration model that we operate in this country. And frankly, when you see the jail overcrowding here locally, that we're contributing to as well. And I think we need, again, to be leaders, to find alternatives to incarceration, be leaders on issues such as bail reform. And I think those would help alleviate a lot of things because they would see that you have real leaders. They're not bureaucrats that are only contributing to the problems instead of making things better. And at the same time, not making communities any safer. And so I think that we have to make sure that we're working also to help empower our youth and dismantle the cradle to prison pipeline that exists. with our youth that start from the 3rd grade. If they're not reading at grade level, they're potentially going to drop out or perhaps end up coming to the county jail that I'm going to operate. So we need to stem the tide, and that takes leadership, that takes vision. These are not pie in the sky ideas. These can be done. I have the criminal justice reform credentials to do it, and that's what I see. It's a holistic approach to improving community relations. It's not one silver bullet. It has to be a number of tools, and I'll use every tool at my disposal to make sure that I'm keeping communities safe and having better relationships.
Thank you. So I just want to follow up for a second because you've talked a couple of times now about community-based policing and as a tool to serve Harris County better. But we also talked earlier about how one of the issues with Harris County is how quickly it's outgrowing the number of law enforcement personnel that we have in Harris County. So how do you balance, as sheriff, how would you balance that philosophy of community-based policing with the fact that you only have a limited number of officers to be interfacing with the community?
We are limited, and so it requires strong leadership to fix the systemic issues that exist. Until we could better manage jail overpopulation, which has been done before. This is not a new problem. We've had issues of jail overpopulation, and there's a formula to reduce it. And so what's happening right now, for example, it's being mismanaged, and so what we're seeing is cost overruns and overtime of almost 500%. And the meter keeps running, and we're paying an extra $1 million every 2 weeks. And so that's not protecting the community out in neighborhoods. Instead, we're pulling resources from patrols to address this jail issue. That's why I speak so strongly that if we know that jail overpopulation is kind of my opponent, for example, says it's basically the number one source of all his issues, then I think that the sheriff needs to be leading on these issues and not have a bureaucratic answer of, well, it's not in my job description, basically. It's not my issue. We need to be strongly advocating at Commissioner's Court, in Austin, whatever needs to be done, because the priority needs to be to keep communities safe. So if we could stabilize that budget issue, decrease the jail population, then we could reinvest that money back into patrols, similar to what Mayor Lanier did with jail overtime back in the 655 program many years ago, where he used an overtime program, but it was out in the communities, protecting communities as a force multiplier. And I think when you have better management like that, you could find creative ways to do it. I did it when the creation of the Sobering Center. We saved millions of dollars by diverting those that we used to arrest for public intoxication. Instead, we could use those cost savings either A, to provide treatment that will reduce the flow back into the jail system, or 2, we could use those monies to apply towards crime fighting opportunities in the communities. And it could be more deputies out on the street where it really counts, keeping neighborhoods safe.
Thank you. So I'm going to shift gears on you a little bit and talk about technology, which is becoming an increasingly critical component to law enforcement. Can you talk a little bit about how, as sheriff, you would leverage technology to better serve Harris County?
Yes, that's one I was often referred to also as the technology council member in Houston. I helped launch the first civic-minded hackathons where we would find community-based solutions, to common problems or how we could provide a better platforms for the community, either through a website or apps. So I have a lot of experience in that. I helped not lead, but also participate in the open data policy for Houston. So I think that this is right in my wheelhouse. And I think, again, as I said earlier, I'm appalled that we don't even have a body camera system when just about every department, large and small, across this country has started deploying them. And so we're way behind in that regard. And we have to go more to computer-based technology, because perhaps we wouldn't have the errors that occurred, like with Jenny, the rape victim that was misclassified when she went in, was supposed to be as a witness. And we heard D. Anderson even said that she was listed as a witness. She should have been a witness and given treatment, and that didn't happen. So I don't know if they're still using the outdated paper-based model, but we need to move to a 21st century policing agency. And again, that's why we're not leading on these issues. Think of the large number of big data that's out there. We know, for example, that a large number of arrests for marijuana occur in poor neighborhoods. So that should tell us something. What's going on in those neighbors? How could we better work collaboratively to try to address some of these issues? And instead, it's just data that comes in and out, and we're not using it to better protect the public. How do we share crime analysis amongst police agencies, amongst the 8 constables and all the regional police agencies? That's something that I'm very big on. We could use crime analysis information so we could see where the bad people are that we're having a chase, that we're looking for a particular plate number, for example. We could collaborate and share that information. It happens some, but not as extensive as it should be. So I would definitely bring the Harris County Sheriff's Office into the 21st century when it comes to the use of technology, because it's a skill set, a very strong skill set that I bring from my days as a Mayor Pro Tem and council member.
So I'm going to drill down on that just a little bit, because a theme through a couple of your answers has been this idea of shared resources. Can you talk a little bit more about how you think the HCSO should be leveraging shared resources with the other law enforcement agencies that share jurisdiction with Harris County?
Yes, well, one of them, for example, and I was part of the discussions on the city side to see how we could, for example, create a joint crime lab. Why do multiple agencies operate their own crime labs? It would be more cost effective, more effective and efficient if we shared and pool those resources. And so I think that's, for example, an example where we can continue to lead on those discussions or advance those discussions forward, because it makes sense. We also, I'm very collaborative in nature. A lot of the initiatives, because I'm mindful of the budget constraints of any organization. I'm mindful of that. When I helped open Cafe College last December as a crime prevention tool to help address youth issues and gangs in the community, for example, I collaborated with Project GRAD, the City of Houston, with the library, and also the municipal court. So students that may have received a nonviolent ticket or citation for something that occurred in school or something, now they had an option where maybe they could go take a workshop at Cafe College, learn something positive, and at the same time that ticket could perhaps be dismissed, but now hopefully we're trying to divert them away from the criminal justice system that is so costly. So that's an example of, again, pooling resources with other agencies. There's times that the Sheriff's Office, because of our sheer size, can be helpful to many regional organizations, but at times maybe there's a unique expertise out there that we could benefit from. And so we need to make sure that we're doing, again, with the priority of keeping communities safe, always number one.
Thank you. So you actually anticipated my next question, but I'll ask it anyway. That way, if there's anything else you'd like to add, we can cover it. So obviously a major issue in Harris County is jail overcrowding. You've talked about a couple of the ways in which you'd like to see the population decrease, but can you just say a little bit more about what your vision is for addressing jail overcrowding in Harris County?
Yes. One of the primary things would be alternatives to incarceration. I think I touched on a few of them. I helped create the Sobering Center that diverted approximately 15,000 individuals from the jail system. I already done it. I'm a proven leader on these issues. There's also the model where we could look at other cities and what they're doing. We've seen comparisons and the cost savings that would result if we were to implement the LEAD program, for example, that's out of Seattle, where we look at minor offenses, minor drug offenses, for example, for first-time offenders and others, and we could have a more robust program here. So that's, I think, an important area that we could really be a leader on, and we're not. We're not doing enough. We could also take advantage of cite and release sometimes, where you issue a citation for certain minor crimes, nonviolent, that the state already provides, and we're not taking advantage of that. That's a very important component, this alternatives to incarceration that keep communities safe. Secondly is, again, I think bail reform is at the heart of it. Of the 9,300 average inmates that we have, 75% are in there simply awaiting bail, and they're too poor to bond out. I'm sorry, they're simply awaiting their trial, and they're too poor to bond out. So we need to be strongly advocating. While I would not be the one that could fix it on my own. I could definitely be, because of my position as a chief law enforcement officer in this region, I could help coordinate the solution, bring people to the table, make sure we're working with judges, with the DA, with all involved, with the legislature as well, so we can make sure we really speak to the issue of how this is hampering safety out in the communities, because our jails are so overcrowded, and then it's very costly when you look at the cost of managing a jail and all the bureaucracy that comes with it. But at the same time, there's things that we could do. In other words, what we're seeing right now is poor management and leadership with the cost overruns. By not addressing it, we're sending inmates to private prisons. You know, and I've talked to other agencies that say, we're happy with Harris County because you're helping fill our budget coffers and it bothers me, because we should have a more effective system, you know, and there's no reason we can't. But we need to lead on these issues. We can't be bureaucrats that simply say, again, it's not part of my job description, because I will always see that my number one priority will be to keep the community safe. And if I run an effective jail and I'm being a leader on these reforms, then I'm going to accomplish that goal.
Mr. Gonzalez, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us tonight. We're coming to the end of our hour, so what I'd like to do now is give you a couple of minutes if you'd like to just address our viewers who are watching at home and let them know why you think they should vote for you.
Well, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for this opportunity, and for all of those that are watching us at home and online. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my ideas on some of these very important issues that are facing our county. This is a unique opportunity because for this particular seat, no one's been elected to the position. My opponent has had a year and a half to show that he's up to the task, and frankly, time after time, he's shown us that he's not. We've seen scandal after scandal, whether it be the jailing of a rape victim that was mistreated for 27 days while inside the jail, and we recently heard from the current DA speaking to some of the mistreatment that happened inside the jail, where the rape victim was beaten, denied treatment, and other horrific things that occurred. We've seen an inmate that was on a misdemeanor for supposedly stealing a guitar, was beaten by another inmate, murdered, and the killer was allowed to walk free because while it was on camera, no one was watching the camera. We've seen issues such as the young African-American woman that was stopped on a traffic stop and was forced to undergo an illegal body cavity search. And my opponent defended the two deputies that had already been indicted by a grand jury. These things are not acceptable, and we simply cannot afford giving my opponent a 4-year term. We need stronger leadership. We need an organization that is of the 21st century. I have the proven crime-fighting experience. I have the proven criminal justice reform credentials, and frankly, I have the proven leadership to not only clean up our county jail, but also to keep our community safe. I will be a reformer that will work hard every day. I'm not going to be a part-time sheriff. I'm going to be on the job, making sure that we're working with all agencies to make Harris County the safest it could be, and frankly, be a model. So I humbly ask you for your vote, again, in this very important election, and I ask you to go to my website at edforsheriff.com to learn more about some of my programs and ideas that I have for the Harris County Sheriff's Office. Again, thank you for this opportunity. Please exercise your right to vote and vote Ed Gonzalez for Harris County Sheriff.
Thank you. And for those of you who've been watching at home, thank you so much for joining us tonight for conversations with the candidates for Harris County Sheriff. This conversation and all of the others that we have hosted this election season are available on the Houston Media Source YouTube channel. So you can check out the candidates for Harris County Department of Education Board of Trustees, County Attorney, District Attorney, this conversation. And remember to tune in next week for our conversation with the candidates for County Tax Assessor Collector. And if you want to have your judicial ballot demystified, we have a conversation on that as well. Remember, early voting starts on Monday. Monday through November 4th. If you need information about where to vote, if you live in Harris County, visit harrisvotes.com. If you live in one of our neighboring counties, visit votetexas.gov. That'll give you information about polling locations and what you need to take with you to the polls. And if you need information about the candidates, be sure to visit our League of Women Voters voter guide. It's online at vote411.org. You can search it by zip code. All of the information we've collected from all of the candidates on your ballot is right there for you. So on behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Houston area, I'm Rita Hicks. Have a good night.